Esteemed members of the press, I welcome you all. We have come to the end of the second meeting of Antalya Diplomacy Forum. I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. President for his patronage and presence at the forum. This year, the forum was a success again. I would like to first share this with you. And under the auspices of our President, I would like to thank all the participants to our forum. I would like to thank all our guests who responded to our invitation. Just before the forum, we hosted a very historic meeting on March the 10th, and we have brought together the ministers of foreign affairs of Ukraine and Russia for the first time in our country since the start of the war in Ukraine. All the eyes and ears of the world were on Antalya. And the fact that both parties asked for our attendance to this meeting also is an indication of the trust they bestowed upon in our country. And from the very beginning, we have taken a principled and diplomacy-oriented attitude. We will continue our sincere efforts in this direction. On Friday, March 11th, we opened our Antalya Diplomacy Forum. In the last 3 days, in a very free environment, we exchanged our honest views and opinions on many current issues. We listened to different points of view. We worked on new ideas, and ADF now is an internationally known and recognized event. This year, we had a wide participation and hosted more than 3,000 people in Antalya, 17 heads of state and government, 80 ministers, 39 international organization representatives attended our forum this year. And we brought together participants from 75 different countries. That means more than a third of the states in the world, roughly 40%, were represented here at the highest level. But both diplomats and the representatives of the international organizations show us that this actually it's up to roughly 1/3 of the world countries. This increasing interest in the Antalya Diplomacy Forum is a clear reflection of our entrepreneurial and humane foreign policy that we carry out under the leadership of our president. On the occasion of the forum, our president had 11 bilateral meetings and I had 67 bilateral meetings. Our guests also had a lot of contacts with one another. Thus, the pulse of diplomacy was beating in Antalya for 4 days, and they shared their pleasure in getting to meet with multiple countries' representatives. And this enriched our content as well. As our president mentioned in his inauguration speech, we asked the question how we can use diplomacy better to make the world a better place, and we aimed to focus on the changes of diplomacy. So this is why we focused on the question of how to better use diplomacy, and we chose recoding diplomacy. We have 3 leaders sessions, 27 panels, 4 interviews, 3 roundtable meetings, 3 side events over 3 days. And also we had the speaker's point outside, which allowed the youth to have their word who were not able to participate in the panels. And we wanted to benefit. Since we're talking about recoding diplomacy, we wanted to hear the youth, and they used the speaker's point to share their opinions. So 64 members of our youth have found the opportunity to express themselves, and I thank them for their participation. We also benefited from the visions of many different participants, from politicians to international organizations, representatives, business world, and entrepreneurs were all listened to sincerely. Just like last year, we listened to the voices of our youth, not only as speakers, but also in our panels. 400 students from 97 universities from every corner of our country participated into Antalya Diplomacy Forum. And last year, many of our students who joined the forum took part as our guides and as our volunteers. So I would like to thank them for their participation. Especially, they shown a sincere interest and care to our foreign visitors, and we heard a lot of compliments about them from our foreign guests, which pleased us immensely. Most of them were female students, and they were very attentive. They raised really good questions. We had two activities with the theme of ADF youth. We had the drama series actors last night with our youth, and this morning our national women's volleyball team, Eda as the captain of the team and the head of the federation, and Minister of Youth and Sports joined our youth for another session. The leaders of today and the leaders of the future met under the same roof and had the opportunity to communicate in a liberal environment. We brought them together. So it was a connection between those two parties. In this year's diplomacy tunnel, we included approximately 400 images under the headings of historical origin of diplomacy, modern diplomacy, and recoding diplomacy. We had two digital exhibitions. Diplomacy now is obliged to appeal to wide audiences and consider the contributions of many different stakeholders. And one of these actors is definitely the media. And this year, approximately 600 press members from 27 countries followed the forum, and especially all of them. I was going to thank them at the end of my speech, but I would like to thank them again. You have helped us to make Antalya Diplomacy Forum visible, not only in our country, but all throughout the world. My dearest friends, Antalya Diplomacy Forum has taken its place among the important platforms that shape the discussions in the field of international relations, thanks to its format, guests, and content. In its second year, it has become a memorable event. We will further consolidate, we will further enhance the position of our forum in the annual calendar of international meetings. It's going to be a forum that everybody wants to know, to jot them down on their own calendars. We, of course, need diplomacy more than ever. We see that the views and opinions and the context established at Antalya Diplomacy Forum contribute to diplomacy and dialogue, which pleases us immensely. More than 2,500 people took part in the organization of the forum, and all of these members of staff, along with our friends in the offices in Ankara. We had a very long preparation period. I sincerely want to share this with you. We have a coordination center in our ministry for ADF coordination, and our major ambassadors and executives from different departments take part in this center. They worked round the clock, and I consulted with them once a week, and more than that when the time got close. 2 or 3 times a week we gathered, and Mr. Fahrettin and Mr. Ibrahim joined us from the presidency, and including Ms. Gülşen and our academicians contributed immensely to this forum. I can't thank them enough, and in every speech I say how pleased and honored I am with working the most qualified diplomats of the world. And I mentioned that after last year's ADF, I work with the best diplomats of the world. I proudly announce this, and I see how beneficial it is for me. So I can't really thank enough my friends, and I have to give them all the credit which is due. I am unable to be grateful enough to you. And also, we had sponsors who supported our forum. We showed who they are on our screens, but we expect their support in the coming years as well. This is not only beneficial for diplomacy in our forum, but also our country. And this is why the private sector also owned this forum, and we have delegated certain panels to the private sector companies, and they have owned and run those panels, and we had many important companies joining in as listeners and participants. Also, with the international organizations, with many forums and think tanks, we organized joint panels. And most of them brought us the offers after the first Antalya Forum. With some of them, we were unable to work together because we didn't have enough space. Universities, think tank, from Mexico to Singapore, from Europe to Africa, Asia, and Middle East, many different stakeholders asked us. And during the year, with these partners, okay, we have this one major forum here, but we organize many activities with many of them. Before the main forum, we had a series of 10 video conference webinars, and some of them, as I mentioned, were realized with our partners and stakeholders. And from today till the next one in Antalya, we will have multiple activities organized with our partners. I would like to once again thank all the members of the press. You worked hard just like last year. You supported us very strongly, and God willing, next year I hope to see you again here. Thank you for your participation and contribution. And now I would like to take your questions. Esteemed President, esteemed ministers, since yesterday afternoon, in a mosque in Ukraine, we hear that certain Turkish citizens are isolated, and they tell us that the mosque and the environs are being bombed. What kind of intelligence or information did you receive? And yesterday, through your ministry, you announced that you had a meeting with Lavrov. Was it concerning this bombing news? Can you please clarify? Thank you so much. As you closely follow, before the war started, and actually before the decision of Russia's recognition, on 12th of February, we have warned our citizens, especially to leave the eastern parts of Ukraine by calling them personally, sending them messages. Around 5,000 citizens returned back and who left Ukraine. And since the day the war started, roughly 14,500 people, 480 citizens are evacuated. Around 4,000 of them used their own means to arrive the border, and then we passed them through the border. Some of them passed the border without our support. I'm only giving you the numbers for the citizens we assisted. And last night, 489 citizens have been evacuated from certain areas, including the places Kherson and Kharkiv, which are still under conflict, have been evacuated. And you know, after the COVID pandemic, we established a coordination and support center with the leadership of Mr. Yavuz, and this is the General Directorate of Consulates, but all our friends, Mr. Sedat, Mr. Farooq, and his teams also formed groups, and we have evacuated 100,000 people from all over the world, from more than around 165 countries. And now 14,500 people are brought here, but we still have citizens left in the conflict areas, one of them being Mariupol. And when we had the trilateral meeting with Lavrov and Kuleba, we talked about the necessity of keeping a humane assistance corridor, because it's not only about our citizens, there are citizens of other countries as well. Since now this became a street fight, the evacuation of the citizens are quite risky. So we need to have a humane ceasefire, and we need to establish a corridor for that. We are still in contact with both parties, but unfortunately they have not agreed on which way the corridor should be opened, as they have mentioned in the press conference that day. And there's another problem here. The infrastructure of the country is totally gone. The mobile phones do not work. There are some satellite phones, and we had a meeting with the High Commissioner of the United Nations, but it's very difficult even to communicate with a satellite phone. Yes, we have our citizens in the aforementioned mosque, and we called them. We used our contacts in the field, and we used the satellite phones to stay in contact with our citizens. The news about the mosque being bombed was not approved by the imam of the mosque. He said that it was a nearby area near the mosque, but the mosque is intact. And the Russians asked us how many citizens we had in the mosque, and we have shared that information with the Russians. Of course, on one hand, we support the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, but we also think that we need to work on a humane level and for assistance. After Mr. Lavrov thanked me for that dialogue, and I called Kuleba yesterday after about 30 meetings. I thanked Lavrov, and I asked for support for evacuation of our citizens from Mariupol, because the conflict still goes on. We're sending our buses downtown, but the buses are unable to go in there because of the current fight going on. So we couldn't manage to get them out. But today we will continue to work on the last pieces of information is with Mr. Yavuz. Yavuz, is there any recent developments about that? Our buses are waiting at the region. The problem here is we can't use mobile phones, and since still there is the conflict, the strife going on, even if we got our citizens, we don't know how to get them out of the region. And we're still waiting, but there were a couple of people who wanted to stay there. But more than 90% of the people, I believe, will have been evacuated, because sometimes the people who told us that they didn't want to go back changed their minds, and they say that they want to get back. So we transfer them outside of that region. His Excellency, I'm from Azerbaijani television. I would like to first congratulate you for establishing such an important activity. And you have given the message that the peaceful agreements can always be possible. I would like to congratulate you on that. The 2 days ago, Armenian spokesperson said that they would look for mediation to have an agreement with Azerbaijan. And how do you assess that? And when you talk with Ministry of Armenia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, did you talk about this topic? Thank you so much. After the war ended, after the Nagorno-Karabakh victory of Azerbaijan getting back its invaded land, both Azerbaijan and Turkey focused and underlined the stability and peace of the region. And Azerbaijan offered a comprehensive peace agreement to Armenia. We're talking about a peace agreement. We're not talking about conflict or contradiction or any kind of mediation. So everybody needs to do what they need to do for the peace of the region. Mr. Aliyev suggested 3+3, the South Caucasus countries, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Iran, and Russia and Armenia, was responded with a positive reply by our Prime Minister, President first, and we had the first meeting, as you already know. Among us, we also keep talking on a 3- or 4-sided means, and we have our own mechanisms. When the relations become normal again, and when we have a peace agreement, why would we not include Armenia? Because we're talking about peace, but this calls for Armenia having the same perspective and approach. You should not need a third party in a peace agreement, I believe. Okay, we had the war, we had the invasions, and it has ended. So now Armenia and Azerbaijan get together and negotiate about this. If there's anything that engages us as a third party, we will support it. But every step to be taken between Armenia and Azerbaijan is supported by us, and we also support them to implement the projects between them. And we have a process with Armenia that is supported by Azerbaijan as well. We always mention the same thing. We are always in coordination with Azerbaijan. Let nobody find this weird. We are two nations, but one people. Two states but one nation, and this will always be the same. And we had a bilateral meeting with Azerbaijan as well, and I shared it with the press as well. Of course, we have our special representatives bringing certain issues to our attention. We assessed and evaluated them, and we talked about what needs to happen for full normalization of our relationships. But the peace agreement that Azerbaijan offered, we hope, will be positively responded by Azerbaijan. And we told that this would be for the benefit for everyone. And Mr. Mirzaev said that they wanted to start the peace agreement negotiations. He said this because even the negotiations might take a long time. They will both have suggestions, and it is an important step to start the negotiations, I believe. Ecem Toplar Bengitürk, we had a major participation from the Taliban government, and they made a call for international recognition. Did you talk about this in your meeting with Mr. Muttaki? And including Kabul airport, Turkey volunteered for running 4 airports, and we were at the last stage. But why the process is very slow? Could this be due to the impact of UAE? We want the ADF to be comprehensive. We invited everyone, Greece, the Cyprus, Greek side. We invited everyone. This is a free space, and we want everyone to be heard. This is not an official forum, and for important opinions and views to be heard and listened to, we invite everyone. at the end of the day, we had an Afghanistan panel as well. This is very natural that we invited the interim government of Afghanistan, because everybody says a lot of things about Afghanistan, and it's useful that Afghanistan is actually there, and it is necessary to hear them out as well. We had certain contacts and relations with them previously, and we told them in a very friendly fashion what they needed to, which steps should be taken for international recognition. We focused on the importance of the recognition for the Afghan people. Without the recognition, many of the problems will not be resolved. Okay, there are lots of different types of humane assistance and help initiatives, but without the recognition, they won't be able to overcome the obstacles. There are lots of things that needs to be done, and the Afghanistan government needs to take certain steps, including inclusivity. We hear positive messages or announcements, but then the action doesn't follow. We don't need to hear more messages. We need to see the actions. Okay, we sent help, we sent our trains, we have our Maarif Foundation schools, we have our business people traveling back and forth, but we are not in a rush to recognize them, because just like the rest of the world, we need to see the steps tangibly being taken. About the Kabul airport, we have a memorandum, an agreement with Qatar. We established a joint company. If we can agree with the Taliban government, we have everything set up between Qatar and Turkey on how to run and operate. Now we are negotiating with the Taliban. There's not only one Taliban, there are different opinions within the Taliban as well. And in Doha and Istanbul and in Afghanistan and in Kabul, we have the lateral meetings. We have told them about the projects. We don't see it as a means of profit. We see it as a support for their development. It's important to keep the airport as a human help, actually, to keep the, and we need to know that they need to meet the needs at the field in the country. Honestly speaking, we can't say this is the case right now. And with a Turkish Qatari company has not agreed completely with the Afghan interim government. And we clearly stated this in our meeting with Mr. Muttaki, and we told them that this should be seen as a help from our side, and it's not a profit-based project. And we only actually started talking about Kabul airport, but they wanted Mazar-e-Sharif, Kandahar, and Herat airports to be added 6 months apart, starting with Kabul. They talked about this, and we added this to our agreement, but there are still some different opinions on certain issues. We were going to get 4 questions, and is it 2 now? Ulusal Channel Bursa Genç Türk. Mr. President criticized the sanctions. What will Turkey's stance be? And we had a principled, clear, and open approach. We tell what we can do and what we cannot. Certain steps we take might bother Russia, and some steps we don't take, even though the West doesn't say much, they are in an expectation. And we clearly explain in terms of our obligations, closing the airspace. What did we always say? We will execute the relevant articles of Montreux Agreement. When we look at the Montreux Agreement, we're not supposed to close our airspace. This is a legal responsibility, obligation. It's a legal obligation. And we believe that the sanctions won't solve the problems, especially the steps towards innocent people, as our president has previously explained, as well as the inauguration speech. He eloquently explained it, and we have the same stance now. There's no change in our approach on that front. The last question now, then. There are two hands raised. Now we have the bilateral meetings downstairs. His Excellency Mr. Minister Fuat Uğur from Türkiye newspaper. First question, Turkey is now at the Russia-Ukraine negotiation table. So I'm asking this question to you. We know that Vladimir Putin said there are positive developments, and Zelensky said we won't enter NATO anymore. So is it what you think, what he mentioned by positive improvements? Do you see hope for peace? And secondly, it was mentioned that Iran was at the table for nuclear balance. We had a panel yesterday, and Mr. Fuat Hussein, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Iraq, was there, and he said that USA and Iran agreed about nuclear weapons, and they will announce it soon. Can you please elaborate? Thank you so much. Now, unfortunately, because of the war, even in many important topics, we can have bottlenecks or obstacles. Certain improvements are prevented because of the war developments. A month ago, about the nuclear agreement, as far as we were informed, they agreed 95%. And at the start of the forum, the rate was 99%. We could have almost said that they totally agreed. But the negative approach of Russia, they say Russia had a negative approach. I hope this doesn't happen, because the positive impact of an agreement will not be useful for only the two parties, but all the other parties, including Russia itself. But a very troublesome topic being opened again in such a difficult time will create more problems. I hope that they can reach a full agreement at the shortest possible time that everyone will support. And about the other topic, that day both Lavrov and Dmitry Plogan had individual press conferences, and they mentioned that we worked on bringing the leaders together even before the war started. And in principle, Putin said on the phone to our president that he wasn't against this meeting, and Lavrov repeated that himself in the press conference. Ukraine is ready, and on the other hand, between themselves, they are in a very serious negotiation in the meetings in Belarusia. And on the other hand, there are also other channels doing certain initiatives which we support and help as well. All these channels need to be kept open, and we are a non-biased and independent country, even though we have certain differences, and we are a country that both parties trust, and they want us to be in the process about the NATO membership, about the approach, and about the Russia not being being the official language in Ukraine. And also there is a comprehensive peace agreement opportunity. We see that there is an improvement in the process towards maybe an agreement, but the First thing is the ceasefire. The topics should not be discussed under guns, but it should be discussed after the guns are silenced in a peaceful environment. Especially important topics and historical decisions need to be given so that we won't have another war. And we contributed specifically to start this process, and we want to finalize it with a ceasefire and a peace agreement. Putin said that there were positive improvements due to certain developments created. Thank you so much. Have a great day.